Why would a family invite you to a wedding, only to dress you like shame itself? That's what happened to Ariake and Abiyakuta, and some say if not for what followed, nobody would have even remembered she was there. Ariake was the kind of girl most people overlook. She didn't shout. She didn't fight. She just stayed quiet. Her mother had died when she was young, and since then, silence became her shield. Her father remarried, but the new woman in the house never truly opened her heart to her. And the man? He stayed distant. He fed the house, but he never fed the heart. Her brother was the only one who once made her laugh. He'd walk her to school, teach her little songs. But life happened. They grew older, and slowly, even he stopped looking her way. The day of his wedding came like rain that gives no warning. Ariake wasn't told in detail. No one asked if she had clothes. She just heard it from neighbors that the family was preparing for the big day. Still, she dressed up in her cleanest wrapper and arrived quietly at the compound. She didn't expect much, just to belong, even if for one day. The place was full of music and movement. Drummers beat the talking drum. Aunties danced and lace. Uncles clinked glasses of palm wine. Children wore matching outfits. The groom, her brother, stood tall, smiling with guests. It was everything a wedding should be. But when Ariake entered the house to ask what she should wear, her stepmother barely turned her head. She pointed to a black plastic bag on the floor. "Take that. That's what's left," she said. Ariake opened the bag. What she found inside wasn't just an old dress. It was a piece of cloth full of stories it had no business telling anymore. The sleeves were torn, the zip broken, and there were patches on both sides, badly stitched, like someone was in a hurry to make it just wearable enough to insult someone. There was no jewelry, no scarf, just that dress. Ariake didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She changed into it, tied her own scarf, and walked out like someone used to swallowing bitterness without water. The compound changed when she appeared. Heads turned, but not in admiration. Some of the young girls nudged each other, laughing behind their fans. A boy took out his phone and took a quick picture. Even the caterer gave her a long stare, as though she didn't belong among the guests. She found a small plastic chair at the back, near the water drum, and that's where she sat today. No one offered her food. No one checked on her. Even her brother passed by her twice, once on his way to the altar, and again when he was giving his thank-you speech. He did not greet her, but Ariake didn't leave. She didn't stand up to defend herself. She just sat there, eyes quiet, face straight, not proud, not broken, just still. People whispered, "Why did she come looking like that?" One woman muttered, "She's always been the pity child." Another said, "If she had shame, she would have stayed at home." But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that this girl in rags was not the weak one in the story. She was just the one the story hadn't reached yet. And that's how the wedding ended, with everybody dancing, laughing, and telling stories, while Ariake slipped away when no one was looking. Not even the photographer included her in a single frame. But they would all remember her face later. Not because she shouted, not because she fought, but because the girl they ignored would soon become the name everyone would whisper, this time not in mockery, but in awe. 3 days passed after the wedding, and the compound had returned to silence. The decorations were down. The hired chairs had been taken back. Leftover food had gone sour. Only the echoes of music remained in people's memories. Everyone thought the wedding was the biggest news they'd talk about that week. But they were wrong, because on the third morning, just after the rooster crowed and just before the sun got too bold, a black car rolled into the street. Not a regular car. No, this one was long, with tinted windows and a number plate nobody recognized. It moved slowly, like it wasn't in a hurry, like it knew it had people's attention. Mothers peeped through their curtains. Mechanics stood up from under cars. Even children who had been playing with bottle caps paused and stared. And then the back window came down. Just a little. It was Ariake. Yes, the same girl they had dressed in rags. But this Ariake was no longer wearing that torn dress. Her hair was neatly braided. Her blouse was clean and simple, but clearly expensive. No makeup, no loud jewelry, just quiet class. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply looked out, as if she was checking to see if the house was still where she left it. Behind the wheel was a driver in uniform, and beside her in the car sat a woman, the kind people don't talk to anyhow. Her name was Madame Fatakemi, and in Abiyakuta, that name didn't need introduction. She owned shops. She sponsored women's cooperatives. People called her Aya Oniile, the mother of estates, because she had helped build housing projects across the town. She didn't attend parties much, but when she did, people moved aside. So how did she end up with Ariake in her car? Well, it started back at the wedding. You see, Madame Fatakemi had come as a friend of the groom's new in-laws. She sat quietly at the event, didn't eat, didn't talk much, but she saw everything. She saw when Ariake entered the compound. She saw the laughter, the side eyes, the pity, but more importantly, she saw how Ariake never shrank. She didn't beg. She didn't explain. She didn't look for attention. She just sat today, like a person who had already cried all her tears in private, and now had no drops left to waste on public disgrace. When the party ended and the noise cleared, Madame Fatakemi turned to her assistant and said, "Find out who that girl was." It didn't take long. By morning, she had sent someone to the house, asked for Ariake, said she wanted to speak with her. Not with her stepmother, not with her father, just her. At first, Ariake thought it was a mistake. She even asked, "Are you sure you meant to call me?" But Madame Fatakemi looked at her and smiled gently. "You have something rare," she said, "and I know how to build things that others throw away." And just like that, Ariake left the house quietly, with only one bag. No goodbye to the people who had dressed her in shame. Now, let's talk about what happened after. She didn't just become someone who dressed better or smiled more. She began to grow. Madame Fatakemi didn't treat her like a servant or charity case. She treated her like an investment. She taught her how to run a business, how to speak in meetings, how to choose her words like seeds and not pebbles. She followed her to Lagos for trade shows. She helped her learn how to type documents, balance books, respond to insults with stillness, and lead people with grace. Ariake wrote letters back home, but she never addressed them to her stepmother. And her father? She sent him money sometimes. No note, just his name and the amount. Her brother, after some months, tried to reach out. He said he had no idea what was going on during the wedding. He said things happened fast. He said sorry. Ariake told him she forgave him. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and some distances cannot be crossed with just words. 1 year later, people no longer spoke about the wedding. They spoke about the young lady running Madame Fatakemi's new foundation for training young women in trades. Her name kept coming up in rooms her family could not enter. And the stepmother? Let's just say she still couldn't believe it, because in her eyes, that girl had been nothing, just a spare child. And yet, the same girl now wore the kind of silence that made people sit up straight when she entered the room. In Yoruba land, there's a saying, "Ta lo mmtake alake, ola j emalade nigbamiron." Who knows a child we didn't name? They might turn out to be royalty. So, if you've ever been treated like a shadow in your own home, like you're not meant to shine, remember Ariake didn't scream to be seen. She simply held on, and when the right eyes found her, she was ready. Why do you think people treat others like Ariake this way? Is it jealousy? Control? Or is it fear? Fear of what someone might become if they are given just a little light? Talk to me in the comments. I want to hear your view, genuinely. Let's not just scroll past pain like it's entertainment. Let's talk like family. They say time doesn't shout, but it always tells the truth. 3 years had passed since the wedding. The same neighborhood in Abiyakuta that once turned its back on Ariake was now preparing for something different. This time, it wasn't a wedding. It was a community celebration, the opening of a youth center, and the special guest wasn't a politician or a chief's child. It was Ariake. Yes, the same quiet girl in rags they had once laughed at behind plastic chairs and camera phones. Now she was the one people were hoping to see, greet, even touch. She had grown, not just in status, but in wisdom, grace, and clarity. She now led 2 women's programs under Madame Fatikemi's foundation, one for business training, and another helping orphan girls find safe places to grow. Her name had started to appear in local newspapers. She had spoken on radio. She'd been invited to government events, but never once had she returned to her family home. But her story? It returned before she did. So when word spread that she was coming back to Abeokuta for this event, people got ready. And this time, it wasn't out of gossip or mockery. It was out of respect. The morning of the event came. The town was buzzing. Market women talked while tying their wrappers. Young girls stood near the gates hoping to catch a glimpse. Men in dusty slippers whispered her name like a quiet lesson. And then the car arrived. No loud music. No sirens. Just a dark sedan and calm presence. Ariake stepped out. Not overdressed. Not trying to prove anything. Just poised, soft, confident. Her native attire was clean and simple. Her jewelry barely noticeable. But her presence, it filled the air like early morning light. Inside the community hall, people stood when she walked in. Some clapped. Some simply stared. Some dropped their eyes, not out of shame, but out of something deeper, realization. Her father was there. Her brother came with his wife and new baby. And yes, her stepmother came too, standing quietly near the back. During the speech, Ariake didn't bring up the past. She didn't name names or hint at old wounds. She didn't remind them of the dress, or the silence, or the way people laughed at her. She simply said, sometimes life pushes you to the back of the room, not because you're not good enough, but because you're being shaped in silence. When the time is right, even those who ignored you will take notice, not because you shouted, but because you stood. There was no microphone drop, no big performance, just a message, calm, steady, and unforgettable. After the event, people waited in line to greet her. Some brought gifts, soft drinks, fruit, fabric, not because she was rich, but because she had become something more meaningful. Hope? Her brother came to her quietly. He held his baby and said, I didn't protect you back then. I should have. She touched the baby's hand and said, we were both young. Let's grow differently now. Her father stood at a distance. He looked like he wanted to speak but didn't know how. She walked to him and hugged him gently. Not for long. Just enough to say, I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not who you left behind either. Her stepmother said nothing. And Ariake said nothing to her. Not out of bitterness, but because some wounds do not need conversations to close. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay shut. And so, the girl they once treated like an outsider returned, not as revenge, but as proof that pain doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it builds you in secret. She didn't come back to boast. She didn't come back to punish. She came back as a lesson, quiet, powerful, whole. So now, I'll ask you, what part of Ariake's story stayed with you? Have you seen someone rise quietly like this? Someone people once overlooked? Or maybe, are you someone rising? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be there, reading every word. Let's talk, not like strangers, but like people who know what it means to feel invisible and to find your light anyway.